Okay, Red Skelton, the mean little kid. The mother says to him one day, Junior, are you pulling the cat's tail again? No, Mommy. The cat's doing all the pulling. I'm just holding on. And there was Deadeye. Remember Deadeye, the cowboy? And I remember he would always have a duel at some point. And he'd say, okay, we're going to count up to 3. 1, 2, 3, and then draw. 1, 2, bang! That fools him every time. And also he had a trained horse he was very proud of. And he had that trained horse, and he would say, okay now, what's 1 plus 1? So you'd hear, come on boy, one more. Jack Benny, the famous line about your money or your life, you remember that one? Supposedly the longest laugh ever heard in radio. That's a myth. It got a long laugh when the crook stopped him and he says, I said your money or your life. And he said, I'm thinking it over. Okay. It turned out I met his daughter one time and she said actually the longest laugh wasn't as funny a situation, but it had a situation where they were gathered around the microphone discussing opera. Don Wilson and Dorothy Kirsten of the Metropolitan Opera were at one microphone, Jack and his wife Mary Livingston at the other. And Jack knew nothing about opera. We wanted to get in on the conversation. And Don Wilson would say, yes, in Act 3 of Carmen, I remember. And everybody's so impressed with Don Wilson's knowledge. And Jack wants to show how he knows something. So at one point he said, well, what I think is, and Mary Livingston said, oh, shut up! And that got a 1.5 minute audience laugh. It was the most incredible thing in the world. And it fouled up the timing and everything. Speaking of Jack Benny, at the end of his shows, he would have a quick sign off, and then Fred Allen would be on the other network, and he would always come up with some kind of an insult. And one week, Jack Benny had a very touching story. He said, the children in Waukegan, Illinois, where I went to school, had planted a tree in my honor. It's the Jack Benny tree. And Allen was, I can't really make fun of that. That's a really nice story. So the next week, Benny came on and said, I've got bad news. The tree in Waukegan, Illinois died. So that gave Fred Allen an idea. Fred Allen said, no wonder the tree died. It's in Waukegan, Illinois. The sap is in California. Okay, who else we got? Burns and Allen. We all remember Burns and Allen, of course. And George always had the cigar, and he would say something like, my wife Gracie's kind of funny. I read in the paper one of her best friends died. You know what she said? Goodness, I hope it wasn't something serious. I'm old. I'm very old. There's so many candles on my birthday cake, people gather around to keep warm. What else would George Burns come out with? Well, he always was dating young girls. People say I should date somebody my own age. There are no women my own age. Oh, Jimmy Durante, my wife's favorite always. Jimmy Durante. Inka-dinka-doo, remember that?
Yeah.
And I haven't slept for days and days. It's a good thing I sleep at night. Here's an obscure one. I bet not many people remember Al Pierce, who played Elmer. You remember Al Pierce? He was the shy door-to-door salesman, which is an oxymoron. But I remember he would go around knocking on the door. You remember what he would say? Nobody's home. Nobody's home, I hope. That was it. Another obscure one, Jack Pearl played Baron Munchausen with a big German accent, a notorious liar. And his announcer was his foil. And he would say something, yeah, this in the jungle and this herd of elephants, they're attacking me. And the guy would say, are you sure, Baron? Was you there, Charlie? That got a laugh every week. Now, who was the guy that had the hall closet?
Fibber McGee.
Yeah, Fibber McGee. Well, I remember one time he was on the telephone talking, and he says, oh, hello, is that you, Mert? The mythical telephone. We never heard her, but she was at the other end of the line, supposedly. Is that you, Mert? Your uncle smashed his face and broke both hands? And Molly said, heavenly days. Did the poor man have a fall? No, he just dropped his watch. And Fred Allen we talked about before. He was the master of the dry humor. And he one time came out with a statement. He said, you can take You have to imitate it this way. You can take all the sincerity in Hollywood and put it in a flea's navel and have room left over for 3 caraway seeds and an agent's heart. He said they built the Holland Tunnel so people could go back to New Jersey without being seen. California is a great place to live if you're an orange. That's all Fred Allen. And probably the most popular of all the radio characters, you'd hear knocking on the door in Fred Allen's alley. And he'd say, somebody's a knocking at my door. You know who that was? It was Senator Claghorn, of course. Senator Claghorn. He would say, I'm a true Southerner. My compass only points south, son. Every Thanksgiving we give thanks that we don't live in the North. Don't you say no to me, son. That's spelled N-O. That stands for North. We don't use that word around here. No, sir, we don't. My kids only play in Mississippi mud. We only have Virginia creepers in our yard. We only have Kentucky bluegrass or Kentucky fried chicken. And then the other one that he would knock on the door, Mrs. Nussbaum, the Jewish lady, would come to the door. Remember her? Mm-hmm. And he would say, why, Mrs. Nussbaum? And she would say, you're expecting maybe the Fink Spots? Or you're expecting maybe Weinstein Churchill? Well, that was another of my favorites, of course, was Bob Hope. And Bob Hope had this handlebar mustache sidekick named Jerry Colonna. We all remember him.
Big eyes.
And he said, hello, Colonna, what are you doing? Hope, I'm building a bridge from New York to London. Colonna, you can't build a bridge from New York to London. You can't? Tear it down, fellas. Well, I brought a special guest here with me today. I think you might recognize him.
Oh, Charlie.
Does he look familiar?
Oh, Charlie.
He will in a minute. There he is. Remember him?
Charlie McCarthy.
Well, Charlie, here we are once again in South Carolina. A lot of people turned out to see you today. I see. Who's that guy in the front row? Ask him. What's your name? Tommy. Tommy. Did he pay to get in? No. Nobody's going to pay to get in to see you. You're just a dummy made out of white pine. Oh. Look, you didn't go to school like real boys to learn anything. If I was to ask you a question from history, I might say, what did Christopher Columbus discover? Columbus? Yes, what did Columbus discover? Columbus. Ohio? No, not Ohio. Here's a simple arithmetic question. John Wayne gives you 1 dog and Maureen O'Hara gives you 1 dog. How many dogs do you have? I know. Well, how many? 3. No. John Wayne gives you 1 dog, Maureen O'Hara gives you 1 dog. How many dogs do you have? 3. I already have a dog. No, that's pretty silly. Let's try science. I know you'll have trouble with that. But many years ago, a lot of people thought the world was flat, and if you sailed off the edge, you drop off into space. But they were wrong. So let me ask you, in what shape is the world? I don't know that. All right, in what shape is the world?
Terrible.
It's in a terrible shape. Well, maybe in a terrible shape. Turns out it's neither round nor flat, but an oblate spheroid. What? An oblate spheroid. Do you know your lips are moving? Of course I know my lips are moving. I'm just pretending to be a ventriloquist. Pretending to be a public speaker, too? Actually, I do a lot of public speaking. Charlie, I don't know why you're so mean to me. I'm a good citizen. I vote. I pay taxes, give to charity. I'm happily married. You're happily married? Yes. How come your wife isn't? Come on now. I've been so good to you, Charlie. I recently made you a loan of $10. I remember. And to show you where my heart is, I'm going to forget half of it. To show you where my heart is, I'm going to forget the other half. Look, there's just one thing I want you to remember today. That is that the Earth is an oblate spheroid. Gee, do you think? No, I don't think, I know. What? I don't think I know. I don't think I know either. Let's talk about our special guest for today. First, Mr. W.C. Fields. I hate W.C. Fields. Why do you hate W.C. Fields? He says I'm only fit to be a snack bar for woodpeckers. And he gets splinters every time he shakes my hand. Well, I'm sure he's only kidding. Furthermore, he drinks too much. Well, he does go a little heavy on the sauce at times. The other day I heard him yell out, "Hey, who stole the cork out of my lunch?" Well, that's W.C. Fields, but if you don't like him, I know you'll like our next guest. Who's that? Miss Dorothy L'Amour. Woo! I know why you like Dorothy L'Amour. Why is that? Because of that sarong she wears. Well, what's so wrong about that? That's enough from Charlie. And thank you. I brought a few souvenirs today, just to, you can look over later if you like. Let's see. Some of my old political campaign buttons that go way back. Taft, 1912. That's a pretty valuable button. Landon and Knox, Coolidge and Dawes. That's interesting because Dawes, the vice president under Coolidge, was a songwriter. He's the only vice president who ever wrote a popular song. It's All in the Game. Remember that song? Many a tear has to fall, but it's fall. I brought some of my badges, my Dick Tracy badges. I was a member of every radio club there was. The Lone Ranger. He was always sponsored by bakeries, either Sunbeam or, in my case, Eddie's Bread.
Silver
different
cup.
ones.
Silver cup.
Silver Cup in New York, that's right. I showed this in New Jersey when I was speaking in a library. And a little lady in the front row looked at this six-sided badge. She said, "I didn't know the Lone Ranger was Jewish." What else have we got? Oh, here's no third term, and I want Roosevelt again. So that's kind of a clash. And we have get a speedy recovery, re-elect Hoover. That didn't work out too well. And to hell with the Kaiser, a real patriotic button. And this I'm proud of. The men will know this more than the ladies. You know what this is called, gentlemen?
It's a big little book.
The Big Little Book, right. Everybody, we had stacks of them, right?
Yeah.
This is the first one that was ever published. It was made out in Racine, Wisconsin by Whitman Publishers. It's a Dick Tracy detective story. They were all the same. They had the picture on the right, the text on the left. Then they got fancy later on in the late 40s, and they would put a little inset in the upper corner, and you would flip it, and you had a movie. Remember that? I remember. Little Orphan Annie. Who sponsored Little Orphan Annie?
Ovaltine.
This is the Ovaltine shake-up mug, and Sandy says, "Arf, who's that little chatterbox? The one with curly auburn locks, who can it be? It's Little Orphan Annie." We were a little envious because all our neighbors had decoding cards. We couldn't get a dad to give us a dime to send in to get one. You had to have a couple of Ovaltine labels. We had lots of labels, but no dimes. So finally, I convinced my dad, we've got to have one. So sure enough, about 6 weeks later, the announcer on the show would always have a little code at the end. He said, X, R, Q, V, nonsense. If you had the card, you could decode it. It was really a wonderful message always, very important. So we finally got it. Here comes the mailman just in time for the show in the afternoon. He comes up, there's Little Orphan Annie's picture on the envelope. We tear it open, there's the card. We're ready for the announcer, Pierre Andre. And he comes on and says, "Boys and girls, I have bad news. A gang of international spies has broken our code. And so you'll have to ask your dad for a dime and two more," and we just, we're kind of let down. There's the RCA dog. Remember his name?
Nipper.
Nipper. Very good. If I gave prizes, you'd win a prize. I'm going to go over here, fight my way over. It's harder every year to do this. And I've got 3 notes here that you'll recognize. Let's see. We all know what that is, but it's not a coincidence that the notes are GEC. You know why? Because GEC stood for General Electric Corporation. They were the first network. They hooked up WEAF in New York City to WGY in Schenectady, both owned by General Electric, and that was the first network. And when they played the chimes, they had like a little xylophone, and the announcer had to be kind of musically inclined or get a lot of instruction. He'd go, GEC. But sometimes the announcers get mixed up, and they'd foul the whole thing up. So they decided, okay, they'll put them just in order, 1, 2, 3, not like on a keyboard. Then the ones who were musical, they got mixed up. So it'd come out bong, 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 something like that. So eventually they got an electronic xylophone, and you had to just push the button. But the red and the blue network, remember when they were considered a monopoly, and NBC had to break up and do the red and the blue. and the red stayed NBC, and the blue became ABC later on. Well, I think I told somebody the other day this story about Hal Perry, who played the great Gildersleeve. Remember the great Leroy, my boy? Remember Leo? And he was a staff announcer in San Francisco. And they had two programs going, one on the red, one on the blue, which was normal. And the one on the red had Pope Pius XII delivering a very important pre-World War speech. And everybody was listening to that cared. And then the other room was a Bob and Ray type duo, just silly stuff. And he came back in a hurry from a break, and he went in the wrong room to sign it off. He thought he was in the Bob and Ray room. And he said, "This silly bit of nonsense came to you from San Francisco." Every Catholic in San Francisco wrote a letter demanding they fire this guy. That was Hal Perry. I think they succeeded in talking him into keeping his job. I've got a lot of books up here, and afterwards, if anybody interested in any of the trivia books I've written, they're available. The reason I started writing trivia books a few years ago, I had a publisher at my house, and he said, I did a lot of, well, let me back up. I did trivia on television accidentally on the Good Morning America show in the morning. My job was just to give the time check. It's now 10 minutes past the hour here at ABC New York. And they had a power failure in one of the studios, so he came in. He said, "Bill, would you fill for a few minutes while we straighten this out?" And I said, "Okay." Most announcers would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue with our program. In the meantime, here's some organ music," or something like that. But I was in the mood to not do that, and I said, "Did you know the first person to lose the presidential election was Thomas Jefferson?" And that helped fill the void. And he came in and he says, "That was interesting." He said, "Do you have any more for the next break?" So I did the next break. It turned out to become the #1 feature on the program. People would write me, they say, "We can get the news anywhere, but we can't get the trivia." Now the publisher's talking to me, he said, "You're well known for doing trivia on ABC. Would you like to write a book?" And I said, "The bookstores are full of trivia books. You just look." He said, "But not for older people." I said, "You're right, because trivia questions today, if you turn on Jeopardy, something, rap music stars, soap operas, things that we don't really care about." So he said, "Write one for the next generation." So I wrote one called the Over 60 Trivia Book, and it was quite a big seller. It's very popular. So as I say, if you're interested, you can come on up and take a look at them. What else are we going to talk about today? A story about, well, 3 programs came out of Detroit, major programs. Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, the Green Hornet, and of course the Lone Ranger. In fact, I've got the Lone Ranger in one of my books here. This will possibly sound familiar to you. There's a story behind how this book got written too. Okay. With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesterday. From out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver. The Lone Ranger rides again. Well, the man who did that, Fred Boy, was a good friend of mine. And I asked him, I said, "Did you know when you did that show in Detroit, it would be remembered 80 years later?" And he said, he had no idea. He was just going in to record a job. And it was the soap operas. Here's one. See if you know this one. It might sound familiar. Yes. The story of cue the organ music, would somebody? The story of an orphan girl named Sunday from the little mining town of Silver Creek, Colorado, who in young womanhood married England's richest, most handsome lord, Lord Brentford Brinthorpe. The story asks the question, can this girl from a mining town in the West find happiness as the wife of a wealthy and titled Englishman? Anybody want to guess what that soap opera was?
My Gal Sunday.
Who said?
My Gal Sunday.
That's close. Our Gal Sunday. A winner. Fantastic. The story behind this book is, I was the announcer, the off-camera announcer on the show called Discovery, and Frank Buxton was the star of the show, and during the many breaks we would have, we would talk trivia. We got to an argument one day about who played such and such a role on radio. So I said, well, I'll look it up tomorrow. I'll settle this easily. I'll go to the New York Public Library, one of the great libraries of the world. I walked in and asked for, could I have all your books on old-time radio, please? This is in the mid-60s. She came back and says, there are none. I said, what? A book had never been written about American radio. They had individual accounts, like Walter Winchell or Bob Hope had written a specific book about themselves. So I said, well, let's do a little pamphlet of some kind. We'll have who played Superman, who played Fibber McGee, and so on. And that little pamphlet grew into this huge book. And luckily, it became the Bible of the industry through no fault of mine. Just there was nothing, no competition. And if people want to know the cast members or the theme songs or anything, so it's out of print, but it's in almost every library in America, and it's still available. I see it on Amazon online. They get used ones. I saw one selling for as much as $400, but they have beat up ones selling for $3 or $4. So that's the story behind that. Okay. Oh, I started to talk about Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. Fred Foy, the announcer, the Lone Ranger, also announced that program. And he told me what happened one day. They always had a West Coast repeat, remember? They would do it live for most of the nation, and the West Coast repeat followed. The show went really well for the rest of the nation. They had a scene where a prospector is tied by some bad guys to a stake out in the tundra, and he's lying there meeting his fate. And a wolf pack comes along, and the she-wolf is in front, and so he's narrating it, and he said, I looked up, that wolf, because he had rescued a wolf years earlier. And he said, I looked, those eyes, those teeth, that hair, those fangs, that's my wolf. And it was very exciting, and of course he was rescued, the wolf rescued him. So now for the West Coast, it didn't go as well. When the guy said, I recognize that wolf, those eyes, those fangs, that's my wife. They said that everybody fell apart in the studio. They could not continue. They had to play organ music for the rest. So the people on the West Coast never did find out what happened. Okay, I wanted to ask somebody, is anybody here has ever had any memory problems?
Every day.
I guess a couple of you. Well, I'm having trouble remembering some of those old songs. Maybe you can help me, because you guys seem to have good memory. Once in Love with
Amy.
Cherry Pink and
Apple.
you guys have great memories. Somewhere Over
The Rainbow.
I'm Looking Over
A Four-Leaf Clover.
I'm looking over a four-leaf clover that I overlooked before. One leaf is sunshine, come on, join me. The second is rain. Third, the roses that grow in the lane. No need explaining, the one remaining is somebody I adore. I'm looking over a four-leaf clover that I overlooked before. Give yourselves a hand, you guys are good. That was music by Harry Woods, kind of an obscure composer considering how famous that song is, and the lyrics by a man named Mort Dixon. Now, Woods could also write lyrics, as he did with some of these songs, you know. Side by Side, I'll Never Say Never Again Again, Ooh, What a Moonlight Can Do, these are all by Woods. When the Red, Red Robin, that's one of Betty's favorite songs, comes bob, bob, bobbing along. And he wrote the music for Kate Smith's theme song, When the Moon Comes Over the Mountain. Remember that? The lyrics for that were written by Howard Johnson.
The Howard Johnson.
Not the ice cream man. It's disappointing. But not all of his songs were famous. He had some good titles, though. These are all Howard Johnson titles. He may be old, but he's got young ideas. I'd like to see the Kaiser with the lily in his hand. Ireland Must Be Heaven, for my mother came from there. There's a broken heart for every light on Broadway. Remember that one? What do you want to make those eyes at me for? I don't want to get well. I'm in love with a beautiful nurse. And one I know that you all know. I scream, you scream.
We all scream, ice cream.
It was the ice cream man after all. The other Howard Johnson. Okay. Any more stories here? Let me see. I think I've told, oh yeah, make some notes over here. Oh, the Mad Russian, I didn't mention him yet. Remember him? How do you do? Eddie Cantor was the first major radio star. And he came out of vaudeville, and he found working in an empty studio with no audience, it didn't work for him. So he's the one that started having audiences come in. And let's see. Oh, this is a personal item. When I was doing trivia on television, I often gave away prizes, and one of them I gave away was the world's toughest crossword. And it was really tough. It was so hard. And I'm pretty good at crossword, but I couldn't get even started. But a woman called me after the show and said, "It's my husband's birthday. Could you get a copy of that for him?" I said, "Yeah." I was really touched. I said, "How thoughtful." She says, "He thinks he's so smart." That kind of backfired. Well, I should tell a little bit about myself. My son is here. He shouldn't hear all this, I guess. but I was very shy as a kid and very into radio. I liked sports. I was a pretty good student, but I never dated. I managed to go all through college without a date. And my mother kept worrying about me. She said, aren't there some pretty girls around or something? And I said, "Mom, I don't care. I've got my radio and I got movies to go to if I can find 11 cents. Finally, she arranged a date. The girl was probably 6 inches taller than I was. And we were going to go to a movie. But the theater, the line was so long, she suggested going to the drive-in. Remember the Passion Pits? So here I am, this naive little kid with this pretty girl going to the drive-in. And halfway through the movie, she says, Bill, would you like to get in the back seat?" I'm embarrassed to tell you what I said. "No, I want to stay up here with you." Charlie McCarthy played roles in a couple of famous broadcasts. One was The War of the Worlds, which some of you have heard the recording, if not the actual thing. And Orson Welles was very clever. He put a disclaimer at the beginning. This is fiction, so nobody would jump out the windows and so on and so forth. But he put it in while Charlie McCarthy on the other network was broadcasting. Then he knew that people, after Charlie McCarthy did the opening monologue, or dialogue with Edgar, that he could start his business about the Green Men invading Grover's Mill, New Jersey, and people didn't hear the disclaimer because they'd been listening to Charlie. So people started to panic, as you've probably heard. And they claimed that in Boston, people said they could see the fires burning in New York. They were using their imagination. There were rumors that people jumped out of buildings. That's never been proved. But anyway, after the broadcast was over, the police were waiting for Orson Welles. There were so many complaints. And he was arrested and booked for alarming the public. And he pretended, "Gee, I didn't realize it would, be upsetting to people." The other broadcast that Charlie McCarthy was involved in was a year earlier, in 1937. And Bergen decided to invite Mae West on the show to do a skit with Don Amici, the show announcer. But she was kind of taboo, because this was a family program, but they thought, well, it's a script from the Bible. It's about Adam and Eve. So how bad can it be with Mae West playing Eve? That's where they went wrong. They approved the script. They went over it with a fine-tooth comb. The script was perfectly clean. It was biblical. Nothing wrong with it. But her inflection, the way she would use her voice to talk about that slithering snake in the Garden of Eden. And people started calling the switchboard saying, "You're putting on the sex stuff on Charlie McCarthy's show." Well, they had to apologize the next day, and she was banned from NBC Radio. How long do you think they banned her? 15 years. In fact, you could not even mention Mae West on NBC Radio for 15 years. So the punishment was pretty harsh. Okay, I'm going to ask for a volunteer in just a minute to see if there are any other interesting things I can tell you about. Well, I had an experience one time. After I left ABC, where I spent 30 years. I went to Channel 9, the superstation in New York. And it was my job one night to introduce President Bush, 41, with the show announcer, Rollin Smith. So I put him on the air as the President of the United States. I sit back and wait for the interview and so on, transpire. All of a sudden, somebody taps on the glass. He says, "Get out." I says, "No, I'm the show announcer." It was the Secret Service with a little hearing aid. And I said, "Well, I have to stay out. You don't have any ID? I got my person. You got clearance?" "No." So I don't ever know what happened at the end of that show because the announcer was missing. So next time Clinton came along, he was running against him in 1992, and Clinton came along and they made sure I had security clearance so I could do the show. Let's see. Well, another interesting thing is Sam Spade, the detective. He was so upset one time. This is all live, you got to remember. And he was at the microphone, and the girl playing a gun mall was late showing up. And he had to vamp. He had to keep making up stuff. And he's so fearful. Finally, she comes running up to the microphone and reads her lines. After the show, he says, "What were you doing?" It turns out she was playing a dual role, and she was changing clothes to get in for the gun mall. He didn't think that was a very good idea. Okay, we're going to bring back Abbott and Costello, but I need someone to help me read one of the parts. So, if there's somebody who can read Cole, I'm going to play Costello. And if I can find somebody, it can be a lady if you want, play Bud Abbott. I need a volunteer that can read.
Your son.
No, he didn't bring his glasses.
He has to get into the act too, doesn't he? Right? Well, here's the script. If you'd like to hear it, there must be somebody. Don, you can read.
No, I can't.
Yeah, come on, come on.
I didn't bring my
You
glasses.
promise you will not boo him. He's
That's
mad,
right.
right?
These are my driving glasses.
Well, if it's really a problem, I'll wait for somebody else to
Yeah,
volunteer.
if somebody could.
Somebody.
Come on, go.
Hey,
Wait,
come
wait.
on up.
I'm Billy Players.
Okay. Well, we got 2 volunteers. Flip a coin.
I'll defer.
You almost had a career in radio.
Oh, Lord.
I had a coin.
Now, there were several variations of the script. It wasn't always word for word, but this is one of the famous versions. Okay. This is asking a lot. You're playing Bud, and I'm playing Lou. So go ahead.
You know, strange as it may seem, they give ball players peculiar names nowadays. On a St. Louis team, who's on first, what's on second, and I don't know who's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellows on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, and I don't know who's on third.
Do you know the fellows' names?
Yes,
Well then, who's playing first?
yes.
I mean the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
The fellow's name on first base for St. Louis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first base?
What are you asking me for?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, who is on first?
I'm asking you, who is on first?
That's the man's name.
That's whose name?
Yes.
Well, go ahead and tell me.
Who?
The guy on first.
Who?
The first baseman.
Who is on first?
Have you got a first baseman on first?
Certainly.
All I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base.
No. What is on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
Don't change the players around.
I'm not changing anybody.
Now take it easy.
What's the guy's name on first base?
What's the guy's name on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
I don't know.
He's on third.
We're not talking about him, huh? How could I get on third base?
You mentioned his name.
If I mentioned the third baseman's name, who did I say is playing third?
No. who's playing first.
Stay off of first, will you?
Please. Now, what would you like to know?
What is the fellow's name on third base?
What is the fellow's name on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
I don't know. Third base.
Third base.
Yes. Look, you got an outfield.
Certainly.
St. Louis got a good outfield.
Oh, absolutely.
The left fielder's name.
Why?
I don't know. I just thought I'd ask.
Well, I just thought I'd tell you.
Then tell me, who's playing left field?
Who's playing first?
Stay out of the infield.
Don't mention any names out here.
I want to know, what's the fella's name in left field?
What is on second?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who is on first?
I don't know. Third base.
Now take it easy, man.
And the left fielder's name?
Why?
Because.
Oh, he's in center field.
Wait a minute. You got a pitcher on the team?
Wouldn't this be a fine team without a pitcher?
I don't know. Tell me the pitcher's name.
Tomorrow.
You don't want to tell me today?
I'm telling you, man.
Well, go ahead.
Tomorrow.
What time?
What time what?
What time tomorrow you can tell me who's pitching?
Now listen. Who is not pitching? Who is...
I'll break your arm if you say who's on first.
Then why come up here and ask?
I just want to know what's the pitcher's name.
What's on second?
I don't know. Third base,
base.
yeah.
You got a...
You got a catcher?
Yes.
The catcher's name.
Today.
Today and tomorrow's pitching.
Now you've got it.
That's all. St. Louis got a couple of days on their team. That's all.
Well, I can't help that. What do you want me to do?
You got a catcher.
Yes.
Well, I'm a catcher too, you know.
I know that.
I'd like to play for St. Louis.
Well, I might arrange that.
I'd like to catch. Now, tomorrow's pitching on the team, and I'm catching.
Yes.
Tomorrow throws the ball, and the guy up bunts the ball.
Yes.
So when he bunts the ball, me being a good catcher, I try to throw the guy out at first base, so I pick up the ball and throw it to who?
Now that's the first thing you said right.
I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Well, that's all you have to do.
I throw it to first base.
Yes.
Now who's got it?
Naturally.
Who has it?
Naturally.
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 I throw the ball to naturally?
You throw it to who?
Naturally?
Naturally.
That's what I'm saying.
Now don't get excited. Don't get excited.
I throw the ball to first base.
Then who gets it?
He'd better get it.
That's it. All right, now don't get excited. Take it easy.
Now I throw the ball to first base. Whoever it is grabs the ball, so the guy runs to second.
Uh-huh.
Who picks up the ball and throws it to what? What throws it to? I don't know. I don't know. Throws it back to tomorrow. A triple play.
Yeah, it could be.
Another guy gets up and it's a long fly to center. Why? I don't know. And I don't care.
What was that?
I said, I don't care.
Oh, that's our shortstop.
Oh.
Greatest routine of all time.